I am hoping our people are here and ready to go. This is going to be an exciting panel today. This is hosted by Prism Comics, where I sit as a board member, and we thought this would be a great presentation for us to talk about Black queer characters in horror films, in horror genre overall, for books, comics, and what have you. Today, we have some of the best when it comes to this to having discussions about horror. These people are just people that I'm big fans of, queer, and they also know their stuff. And I'm very happy they are here. So I'm going to turn it over to Bobby to introduce himself, and then we'll kind of go down the road.
All right. Well, hey, everybody. I'm Bobby Torrez. I have a horror YouTube channel called Bobby Likes the Spooky. And I'm also a horror content creator. And I started my channel just because I didn't see too many brown queer people like myself. So that was my inspiration for Bobby Likes the Spooky.
All right. Well, hey everyone. My name is Ryan Kinney. I go by Brother Ghoulish online. I have a podcast called Brother Ghoulish's Tomb, where I review horror and I also share horror short stories. Right now, all of them have Black queer leads because I felt like I wanted to be the change that I was talking about seeing. Like I actually wanted to create more stories about people like me who look and love like me. And I'm super excited to be here. So I can't wait to get to this discussion.
And my name is Marco Estes. I have a podcast called Midnight Social Distortion. I just started it, and just like Bobby, want to see more representation with Black queer characters in horror. And I wrote a quick history of Black queer characters in horror, and I used it as a springboard to try to vocalize the unsung, marginalized heroes of Black queer horror.
All right. And if you get a chance, please throw that in the chat. I'm sure everybody wants to check that out and read that. So basically what we're going to do today is we're going to kind of go through the decades of horror films. We're going to kind of start with the 70s and then kind of go through those decades and talk about some of the Black queer characters that we love, as well as, you know, just get an idea of who they were and what they represented at the time. This panel has done the research. They know their stuff, and I'm so excited to hear who they're going to pick and talk about. And for many of you, when it comes to Black queer characters, we are barely there. We are barely there. We're not really seeing, let alone the fact that Black characters in horror usually come in, get killed, and that's it. Or we're some type of help, or we are the magic Negro, where we're able to like predict the future and save everything, and yet we are basically there to catapult the white characters. So our role in horror has been really, you know, not the best. We have really grown from where we used to be up to now. But when it comes to Black queer characters, we are still not there at all. So we're going to go through the decades and kind of talk through some of those characters. And if you know the 70s is a big time for horror. That's where we got Black Christmas, we got Halloween, we got Blackula, we got all types of movies, kind of start the whole slasher phase in that time, if you want to say. So I'm going to turn it over to the group, and they're going to kind of talk about Black queer characters from the 70s.
Okay, so I feel like Mark is the right person to start this one because of your article, and you actually talked about in Blackula, Bobby McCoy, which, you know, he's an openly gay character in this picture.
Right. Not only is Bobby McCoy, which was played by Ted Harris, openly gay character, he's an openly Black gay character, and he's a successful, and he has and he does have a white husband. I'm sorry, I had to get myself together. But anyway, but it was they start off the whole modern era of Blackula because they're the ones who I think it was Dracula's castle, not knowing that they purchased. So they were Blackula's first kills, and that was to my.
Got a little buggy.
a black queer character in a horror film that had a role of any sort. Well, but Bobby might have been, you know, like, you might think he's like one off and done, but he pops up later in the movie. His body disappears, of course, and he's browsing the LA streets at night, luring men to their death and whatnot. So, in that sense, I felt like he should be recognized as like being the first openly gay character. A queer coding throughout the years, but no, he was just pretty much said, no, I got a husband, I got a business, I'm me, I don't care, I'm not, you know, I'm living my life the way I want to live it. And Bobby McCoy starts off in the 1970s.
And I think it's crazy because it's something that I grew up in a household where Blackula was on like nonstop repeat. Like my father was like a huge Blackula fan. And you think about how you watch stuff like this as someone who grows to be like myself, like a black gay man, and how sometimes that representation, it goes to the back of your mind in a way that you don't realize until you get into horror and you look back and realize I did get to see a gay man in a relationship who owns a business, who is doing his own thing at the catalyst of me getting into the genre and being very interested in it. And is it really a coincidence that I felt empowered to see myself represented in particular ways so early on? It's probably not a coincidence. And I thought that the portrayal of him wasn't bad. I feel like what Viktor said earlier is so true. So many of the tropes that not just people, you know, as black people we fall into are so hard to shake it loose. But then, you know, especially as we go past the 70s and beyond this, you see the gay black person be the effeminate best friend character oftentimes, or you see them having no humanity of their own or being voiceless, which I feel like we're naturally going to get into when we talk about the 80s. But at this point, we're seeing how, especially because what's happening in the 70s, it's a time of free love and it's a time of music and it's a time of obviously like other things like psychedelics. But there are so many figures like Sylvester in the 70s, who is not just a very talented, you know, musician and disco artist, but someone who has a very striking visual appeal. And there are so many characters around this time frame that kind of fit that bill. So we're starting to get visibility in the 70s. We're starting to be acknowledged for actually being seen. And the voice is something I believe that is going to come later, unfortunately. And it's still something we're working on. But that's the time of visibility for us, or punching through. And when you're thinking about what is happening in the watershed of the 70s, 69 is when Stonewall happened. So that was literally the beginning point of an era of free love and being represented and being seen.
Yeah. That's a very good point. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that, you know, you think about Stonewall, that was a turning point, especially to us as queer people of color really being seen, really being active and engaged. So that was a very pivotal time. And Black Power was a big deal at that point.
Mm-hmm.
It was. And even when you think about Marsha P. Johnson, whose role in Stonewall is, I mean, you can't look around it. Her and her friend Sylvia Rivera, how they were able to basically start the Star House and actually create a sense of community so that queer people of color could come off the street and live in a shelter and be taken care of. A lot of that was funded through sex work in the 70s. And the idea of community that they facilitated, they transcended even that, because they fought for Sonda, which, you know, is now effectively the reason why a lot of us, it set the foundation for legislation that would not allow us to be fired for our sexual orientation. And it didn't end up passing until 2002, which is ironically the year that Sylvia Rivera actually passes away. So a lot of this stuff started in the 70s. And so I think that it was the time where, like I said, we're starting to be seen. And that starts to bleed over into the 80s, where that represent like that visibility, we start to pop up more, because it's still so far away from where we're trying to get to. But at that time it was starting, like people, they were seeing us.
Right. And I will also say that even in Black, I'm thinking like when Viktor said Black Power, I feel like the director of Blackula could have just been like, you know, I just want to have a different, you know, I just want to just open the movie up with like a you know,
Yeah.
doing all this, but he chose a gay interracial couple, and it was that inclusiveness. Like, I'm gonna we're celebrating every aspect of our community in this movie. So I applaud him for that, even though it was kind of problematic which we can get to later on in the show, but it was problematic still, but it was still inclusive in some areas.
I live how you put that.
All right. So it wasn't really, I don't know if it was much of us in the 70s. However, as Ryan was saying, we were beginning to be seen. And I will throw out there, even though it wasn't really any main character of color in this one, well, really having speaking parts and what have you, I think about Eyes of Laura Mars, how that kind of blend in horror, a little bit of disco, a little bit of fashion.
Yeah.
But it also kind of showed, different people of color in these different roles, mostly in the most famous, and y'all, if you haven't seen it, Google it, the famous disco murder scene where they're doing a model shoot and Laura can see the murder happening. But at that time, it has all these models all in this very beautiful pose, and the music, which is very familiar if you ever see it. It shows people of color. It starts out with a black gay guy dancing. So it kind of gives a little bit of us beginning to grow and being seen in films like this. But it gives more of an idea for those of us who never seen each other at that time. They saw someone right there at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
I agree with all y'all. I mean, I wish I had more to say about this, but y'all hit the nail on the head with all of this. But I agree with all of you guys about, especially for that era, representation, I guess, was kind of rare. But at the same time, I'm not too sure, just because, Ryan, you mentioned in the 70s, people were more free and open, sexuality was explored and things like that. So I will say at least they had some representation. Seeing Blackula, seeing Bobby on Blackula. And I wish we had more characters like that in the 70s, like I wish there was more of us being represented in the 70s, but I mean, we had Bobby, so it gets better from there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's jump into the 80s. As 80s, that's when things were beginning, horror took more risks in the 80s. We were getting movies from all over the gambit about just anything. It was just all of a sudden we were getting from serious horror movies to where we got into the video type of horror movies. But yet it was a very creative time. There were risks taken that we don't even see anymore today.
Mm-hmm.
But also at that time, we were beginning to see more Black queer people in roles, and they didn't just play background roles. They actually had a decent part. Where, for example, if they were in Howling 2, Marina. Marina was one of the three. She was one of the main ones, and you didn't want to. Sorry, I'm gonna cuss. You didn't want to fuck with Marina.
No.
And that shit you saw, not only was she giving you fashion, but she was giving you, murders and kills. So, I think about the 80s. I think about a lot of the times we got to see ourselves become a little bit more than just a background character. So I'm gonna turn it over to the panel, let them talk about some of the characters they loved.
I'm glad you started with Marina, because a lot of people tend to gloss over her because of the movie that she's in. But again, like what Ryan said earlier about you not paying attention to that as you get at a young age, but as you get older, you start to pay more the representation when it comes to Black LGBTQ plus characters. So Marina, even
that was what 80,
83, 85, somewhere around the time. So
later in the 80s, yeah.
Okay, so then after Marina, we had Katrina, Grace Jones, and a lot of people don't consider as a queer character, but I'm like, you can't consider exactly,
gloss over Grace Jones, Katrina, because she
was
Lorraine mentioned that, you know that Grace Jones herself is a queer
icon. So Katrina herself falls into that lexicon. I mean, but you don't you? I mean, don't my fellow boys agree?
Yeah, I agree. With Katrina, I seen Vamp at a very young age, and I was just always just intrigued by her. Grace Jones herself, I was intrigued, but with Katrina, it just horror is my favorite genre. So just to see her in a horror film and just to see how mysterious her character was in Vamp. And I remember at a young age, I was kind of ignorant because I didn't know, like, all right, is she, like, I didn't know what she, like, I know she's a woman, but is she trying to be a boy? Like, it was just so much stuff going through my head when I was seeing that character. But it wasn't until I got older and I appreciated her so much more because of all the risks she took. And Grace Jones is pretty much like that character, minus the whole vampire situation or taking people's hearts out. I mean, maybe she's doing it in other ways, but that's Grace Jones. So for me, I always consider her like a queer icon. Queer people love her. I know she loves queer people. She inspires so many of the artists that we have today. And even a lot of queer artists that I know that's indie, they sometimes talk about Grace Jones and how she dressed, and even some of her music inspired them. So I definitely was going to say Katrina from Vamp as well, Mark.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I think one of the things that's really cool about this time period, especially, I mean, if I don't say something about Vamp, then like I'm tripping, because Katrina, she definitely feels very queer to me, and I think it's because I've always been obsessed with Grace Jones since I was very, very young. There's something about her, and I think they referred to it back then as like gender bending or gender fuck. It's this idea of like what matters when it comes to gender expression. Like, we put so much value on these things when in reality they're trailblazing for so many people to be authentically who they are, no matter where those gender roles may fall. But there's something similar between Katrina's character and Belle from Fright Night 2, who and I know we're going to hang out on Fright Night 2 for a hot second. But
the silence.
It's this idea that we're starting to be seen and we're starting to be put in features, but the voice, it's like they don't really know what they want us to say yet. They're still afraid of what we have to say. And we're getting more organized in the 80s, and we're looking out for each other a lot more, because the free love period that came before it, unfortunately, the downside of that, it became a catalyst for the AIDS crisis, essentially. And so you're starting to see horror films that are othering us in a sense of, because I think in Friday Night 2, I get it from this movie too. Unfortunately, it's something I feel like it's kind of like something they could have did better. And I understand it was a period of the time. When I see Belle and everybody, I see where I want to be at. I actually see like they seem to be queer, and a lot of Belle being there's a lot of them that appear to be of color, and they are like the cool kids from my perspective. But from the view of white suburbia, they're the otherness that is threatening to come in and completely disrupt their pattern of white suburbia. And so that's why they had to be slain in the end of that. But, and don't get me wrong, I understand from doing my research, Grace Jones was the one who decided, I don't really want to have a voice in this particular one, because she was inspired by Nosferatu. She wanted to use sensuality, and she wanted to use body language to convey the messages that she ended up doing. And she did that. So, so she killed that. But at the same token, and me and Mark and Bobby have talked about this quite a bit, I want to know what Belle would have had to say, to be honest. I want to hear Belle's story or hear Belle's voice. But I think in terms of what was happening around that time, it was just a really wild time. Like, horror was constantly afraid of the queer other coming in and bringing AIDS, or the queer other and coming up and disrupting whatever the case may be. And it would take a while for media to stop representing otherness in that type of way, in this negative way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I applaud everything Ryan just said, because Belle and Regine and I think his name was, I'm sorry, my mind went blank of the other two, but they are the cool kids.
Belle
they are
matters.
the ones
Yeah.
Bale, yeah, yeah. It's just that when you look at them, you want to hang out with them. They allure this. They have this allure of just like a sense of belonging. Like you kind of see when they walk into the apartment complex or whatever you want to call it, the condos and stuff like that at the beginning of the movie, it's like your eyes automatically go to all four of them. And the ones that you would probably be like, I feel seen. You know what I'm saying? I feel seen. And so I always tell people that when I first saw Fright Night Part 2, I too was like Bobby and Ryan. And who is that? Is that a man? Is it a woman? Not knowing back then what you know now about the vast spectrum that gender resides on. Yeah. And as I got older and I did my research, I was like, well, you know what? Bale would be probably
so I try to make sure the pronouns and everything. So, yeah. But because they
was either or, you know what I'm saying? They just whatever they decided, they could put on the suit and dance with Regine in 1 second, and next thing you know, they got on the whole lingerie set ready to just take down somebody in the bedroom. You know what I'm saying? So, yes. And then when they were out in the public, you know, they had on what they wanted to fucking wear. Excuse me, but that's what they had on. I live for Bale's fashions because that would be some stuff that I probably would have thrown together if I was openly gay. You know what I'm saying? So, and then they gave them the skates. Like you always see vampires coming at you and flying. They get because what else can you do to like throw somebody off? It's like, who is this weird person coming at me with these skates? Like you looking at them trying to take them in, but by the time you do that, you're dead. You know what I'm saying? So it was a clever way of giving them this lethal component, even though, like Ryan said, it was just like you're supposed to be afraid of this and you're supposed to run. My black ass would have been running to Bale like, yo, what's up? How you, yo, I'm feeling all of this. And they're probably looking at me like, you know what, I don't even have time to sit there and deal with you because you're not feeding the kill. I want to hunt you and you're running after me. It's like I'd have been that that person. I don't know what movie it was, but kept trying to run after the vampires. Like, please turn me, please make me one of y'all. So, but no, Bale. I had a big problem with Bale's silence. I wrote an article called "Silent Bale" and equated it to how us Black community is silenced when something's going on in, like, you know, the world in like, you know, current, and especially in the current climate of politics and whatnot. You know, with Black Lives Matter, and you know, you had Black Lives Matter going on, and at the same time the constant deaths of Black trans women, you know, within our community, Black or Black and brown trans women, you know. So we would say, you know, all Black Lives Matter, because, you know, when we say Black Lives Matter, we mean all Black lives, not just cisgender Black lives. And we would have people who would sit there and say, well, we're talking about, you know, Black lives, and y'all come after. We'll get to y'all later. And it's just like that silence, you know, like that just like shush, you know, we're doing this, and you know, we just need you to back us up. And it's like, but when do we have a time to speak? And so I felt that Bale's lack of, I could have included Katrina in that article, but like Ryan said, she chose not to say anything to her uniqueness. But I just looked at Bale, it's like, but why was he silent? Like, that's the biggest mystery. And I hope to talk to the creator and the writer of the movie one day to ask them why was the choice for Bale to be silent. But so that's something that we have to deal with as Black and brown people. We have to like fight for our voice to be heard, especially now when Black horror is becoming to the forefront, and we still have to sit there and have this conversation with people. Like, we need more Black queer content creators and stuff behind the scenes. But outside of Bale, in the 80s, and that was Sebastian from Cleveland, from Once Bitten, who I just recently discovered because I was like, I've seen this movie and you just didn't pay any attention to it, but keep stuff over your head. So when Lauren Hutton's like, Sebastian come out the closet, he said, "Oh, years ago." It's just like you was a kid that went over your head. You just like you just watching the movie, but now it's like, yes, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, yes. So did y'all like Sebastian, too?
Well, before I want to jump on the Belle train real quick before I go into Sebastian. I loved Belle as a kid as well. I mean, obviously I've seen Fright Night 1 more than Part 2, but when I first seen Fright Night 2, I was more scared of him than actually Regine, but I was so like interested in him because just how he looked. I mean, he was awesome, and he was brown, he was black. So I was always just so interested in that character, and I had the same similarity, well, the same feelings how I felt about Katrina. But to go off what you were saying, Mark, like it wasn't just like the outfits and the hair, it was the skates as well. Like they gave him so many like layers where you seen that character was like you wanted to know more about him. You wanted to know more about this character, and for him to not really say anything, it makes it hard. But I get that adds to the scariness, the mysteriousness, because sometimes when people don't say nothing, you want to know why, but you're also scared because it's like, oh, there's a reason why they're silent. But I just wish that, like what you guys were saying, that I wish he did had a voice and he was able to explain his story. And I wish that actor was still alive because I would love to know more. It was Russell Clark, right?
Right.
Yeah, Russell Clark. I wish he was still alive and be able to, explain more about Belle, and maybe we would get more in depth of, with that character. But Belle was a great representation. So good one, Mark. I know you love Belle, but you got to sit on here with that one. Sebastian, I love Once Bitten, big Jim Carrey fan, and then when I see Sebastian, I loved him. He was sassy, he was queer, he didn't give a F, and he was just amazing. I love that character so much, and actually he's one of the main reasons why I watched that movie.
Wow.
Yeah, and again, I love Jim Carrey, but it's just something about Sebastian that is just because, again, we didn't see too many characters like that back in the day. And as a kid watching that, you're always interested in like, oh, well, this character's different. I want to know more. I want to hang with this guy. He seems cool. So yeah, Sebastian, good one, Mark. That was a good guy. I forgot all about him.
I did too.
Yeah,
that was a good call.
And that's the thing, because people was like, I know I wrote the article, and people
like, what about
who's Sebastian? I'm like, you didn't say Once Bitten. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, I've seen this movie though, but I'm not thought about the black guys that he was. Cause it's like, because I hadn't seen it since I was a kid. So I was like, I'm about to go like rewatch this movie again to sit there and take him in, because clips and stuff. I'm like, how the hell did I miss him? He's so damn great. So, and this picture that Viktor put up of him in the beginning of the movie, it's just like that. Where we would have been rocking these fashions in the 80s. Oh, that would have been one of us in LA or Miami setting or something like that. Just being like,
That's how I feel on Sundays.
Stop it.
So are there any other characters in the 80s? I feel like in a lot of ways, Belle dominates.
Yeah.
Just because, and as y'all was mentioning, I'm going to throw in how Belle was also that secret fantasy of vengeance. For a lot of us who grew up in the 80s, we were teased, or because we were a little bit different. And if we grew up, for example, I grew up in the South. I know Mark grew up in the South. If you were just slightly different than what the black boy should be, you were already labeled as something else. But to see someone like Belle have this, was able to be what they wanted to be and do what they wanted to do. And it just excited, I know for me, as a way of like, wow, if I was Belle, I can get revenge. I mean, I'm not advocating for you to go out there and do something bad, but for many of us who were teased, we looked for some type of hero. And in some ways, Belle was a hero because Belle was beyond human and could do all these great things and still look fabulous doing it in ways that we could never imagine. It just challenged a lot of our mindsets of what it is to be queer when you're trying to figure out who are you at that time. So just wanted to throw that in there as well. But any other characters in the 80s that kind of came out to y'all that was just kind of amazing?
Not really, but I wished one character was queer in particular in the Freddy universe. I mean, I know we're talking about queer characters, but I wish Kincaid from A Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Now, guys, that would be awesome if he was a queer black character. And so I wish that they would have took a chance and did something like that with him.
I think somebody was saying, I think I read an article or was talking to somebody or was listening to a podcast where somebody said that Kincaid was one of those that was coded as queer.
Oh.
Okay.
That, you know, by him being like, because you got to think about
his dream power. He was like strong.
Yeah.
And it was like,
I guess they couldn't see that. They probably couldn't
like visualize a strong black man being queer, saying in the 80s like that. So if he did come out as queer, I wouldn't be surprised. I'm like you, Bobby. I would be surprised if he did. You know, he probably, because he seemed like the type of person who would be,
I hate to say this, but another cliche in that he would be teasing the gay
kids because he himself is gay. He didn't know how to handle that. Because we really don't know why he ended up in Western Hills anyway. We don't know, like, because, you know, Taryn ended up there because she was on drugs and nightmares. Phil ended up there because of maybe he was suicidal with the knives and stuff like that.
Right.
All of them had a reason to go there. We didn't know why Kincaid was there.
Right.
And who's to sit there and say his parents to send him there because he was queer and gay? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Back in the day. And back in the day, I know it wasn't more in the 80s, it was more probably like in the 1950s and 60s, but they always try to do whatever to cure your queerness or whatever. So they probably thought, oh, if we send them there, maybe they can fix them or something. So, but that was just my thoughts. I just wish that he was a gay character.
It's interesting to say that because it makes me think about he could be. You know, he could have to fight all his life because, again, a lot of us had to fight. A lot of us had to do a lot to protect ourselves. And for that to be his superpower or what he wanted, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. So if anybody ever revives that character in any form or fashion, take it to us.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
yes.
Now, Victor, I have a question.
Oh, okay.
I was actually, were there any black queer characters in literature in the 80s? Because I know there's a lot. There's a lot. I'm going through black gay literature, but I can't find anything that is like horror based when it comes to black queer characters.
Very few. Like you know, back in the day, there was so many books that were, you know, Zebra.
Right.
They used to put out a lot of books, and there were sometimes black characters featured, or if anything that was about voodoo, because you know the 80s also introduced a lot of voodoo movies as well, Beavers and the Serpent, the Snake, and the Rainbow. I'm messing the title up. But at the point, there were different types of queer characters that they wasn't really labeled as queer, but they kind of came off as queer. And you think about some of the comic characters that we were seeing. They were always kind of like a little flamboyant in a lot of ways that we wasn't really sure that was queer, but just had a queer text to them. So it's really, I have to go back and look, but there was not that much when it came to literature. There'll be like random characters.
Okay. I've been looking.
Well, let's get into the 90s, and we'll try to get in the 90s and the 2000s just because of our time that we have left. But was there characters in the 90s and the 2000s that y'all that you can easily think of that kind of like, there they are, there we are?
I think there was this explosion of characters because it was like this time where now that the AIDS crisis has happened,
Mm-hmm.
and it still impacted us heavily for quite some time, but something major does happen in the 90s when Magic Johnson does express that he in fact has HIV, and he's someone who is straight and he's someone who is not, you know, doing particular drugs. So it's starting to break the stigma, and it's starting to kind of like create an opportunity for more things to go forward when it comes to getting treatment and extending people's lives and making a big change. Like the 90s and the 2000s, there are just so many, because like I feel like the list that Mark made specifically, and then even the time period that we're living in now, it's now we're starting to see people who are gay, like in the 2000s, and Black, represented in so many different television shows. And even though there are so few of us like leading films, or whatever the case may be, that even now exists for a few features. But if I had to just call one off the top of my head, I would probably say from Mark's article, Lafayette was probably the biggest one from the 90s and 2000s for a lot of people. And then later Tara, because this was a show that was on HBO. It was a major, like it was literally playing in everyone's homes. And they were able to see a character who was spicy, but still fighting for his rights. He had a voice and he did have this visual aspect. And literally a main character. Everything about Lafayette, I think, persevered, and it created the type of gay representation that some people would want to see more of, where he was transcending a lot of different, I don't know what the word is, but because he still has things about him that I think some people would consider effeminate or whatever the case may be. But he also had other things that, like with Grace Jones, go on both ends of the spectrum. There was this like deep raw masculinity about the way that he carried himself in certain environments. So I'd probably enter him for Lafayette.
I agree with you. I talked about this in a different panel where we talked about queer representation, and I say for me, Lafayette was a huge part for me, just because I didn't really see too many people that look like me, and to see a strong Black man pretty much carry that serious, because a lot of people watch True Blood. Lafayette, I'm not lying. Like, I mean, yeah, they see Eric and Sookie and all of them, but Lafayette was just like an intricate character for me. And like you were saying, Ryan, it wasn't just like the feminine part of him or the masculine. Like, it was just him. Like, he was just this awesome dude that I didn't see a label on that character, and that's how I see myself in high school. Like, a lot of people was just like, "Oh, you got feminine ways." So, but I'm still not too sure if you're gay or not. And I'm just like, well, that's not for like you to understand really. With Lafayette, they looked at him when he would wear like his eyeshadow and wear his like do-rag in a certain way. And he had like feminine qualities, but the moment somebody tried him, he would knock them the fuck out. Excuse my language, sorry.
Yeah.
But he wasn't a stereotype gay character that they probably would have portrayed in the 80s or 70s, where they would make him like, you know, flamboyant and can't defend themselves and just kind of just throw them away or maybe even kill them. Lafayette was the opposite of that. He was a tough dude. And that's how I see myself. Like, I do have feminine qualities about me. Yes, I do have masculine qualities about me. But I also was a person I didn't really let too many people, and I got bullied. But I wasn't the type of person that I let people walk all over me, because my mom taught me that. And when I seen that character in Lafayette, I was just like, that's me. Minus the eyeshadow, because I didn't do all of that. But I still see a lot of me in that character. So I'm so happy that you pointed out Lafayette, Ryan, because he was definitely one big one that stood out for me.
When Lafayette came onto the scene, and it's another one of those moments where you felt seen, but at that point in time, I was still closeted. And so we would sit there, and every time Lafayette would come on the screen, my mom would sit there and be like, you know, you always champion him, but it'd be like, you know, like, oh, Lafayette ain't gonna take that. And I was like, maybe, just maybe I can sit there and come out the closet now and tell her that, you know, I'm gay, and we were just gonna, you know, but it was the fact that he heralded in, he's supposed to be in the later seasons of True Blood. His character's killed off in the second book. Yeah, the first book, you know, but he was so popular that he came back, and I'm so glad that they stuck with him. They stuck with him throughout the entire run of the show, that he actually made it to the end. He didn't get killed off or anything like that. So that was a victory for all, you know, Black queer horror fans, you know, in itself. Plus, he was powerful. You know, they gave him powers and everything. So, but yeah,
he's a witch.
And I loved when he found it. Ooh, y'all think he's bad now? Ooh. Y'all think he finna bring the pain. You know what I'm saying? Don't never give somebody who, you know, y'all always put down power, because we gon'
yeah.
Who else we got, y'all? We mentioned
yeah.
I want to insert like kind of a it's going to seem random, but Ray from Scary Movie. The reason I know it seems random, right? Because that character gets like a lot of flack, and understandably so. But I wonder sometimes, looking back at it, if it's more commentary around just how ridiculous people who just don't come clean about their sexuality really come off as, not in terms of like people who aren't ready to come out, but the people who are kind of projecting their own negative feelings about gay people in a negative capacity onto other people. Because literally everyone around Ray can tell that Ray is gay. Mm-hmm. And the way that he's carrying himself, it's almost like commentary around that. Like, just come clean and be true to yourself, because literally everyone can tell that you're gay, right? And like it's so funny to think about in retrospect, where so much of that movie, especially from a queer standpoint, is problematic, and how that picture
Viktor.
Viktor, you
don't know who we're talking about.
How about now?
That will mess me up. Yes, that is the child of darkness. So,
yes.
Oh my god. And he be like, he got his lipstick is popping on there too.
Yeah.
Oh my god, not lipstick.
Yeah, I question Sean Wings a lot, but I love him. I also want to say Jeffrey Boyer Chapman. He did Spiral. He was the lead of Spiral. And also he was in American Horror Story Apocalypse, where he played a queer character on there, which was awesome. And I'd like to see more of him, but I was more excited for him in Spiral just because he was a queer Black lead. And originally that character was supposed to be white. Right. But being as though that he spoke to the writers and just like, hey, I want this character to be Black, it would hit more, it would be more interesting. And I'm glad that story was told and it was played by him, because even though Jeffrey Boyer Chapman is problematic in some ways in Drag Race Canada situation, but as an actor, I do appreciate him, and I do like what he's trying to do. And he did it, like, he's an openly queer Black, guy himself. He did a bunch of movies. The Skinny, that was made by Patrick Ian Polk, who didn't know his art. He was in that movie. Not horror, but I'm just so happy to see somebody that's coming from a different world enter horror and just killing it at the same time.
I also wanted to throw in, so we're talking about Spiral, how Spiral was, and I think I mentioned this to Mark, how this was a real deep, fearful movie when it comes to being Black and queer, because of the character situation was.
In the 90s too.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen Spiral, look at it, because it does play on so many different things that we do face in the real queer community. For example, he was married to a wealthy white man, and also he was questioned about what he brought to the table. Who was he? He didn't have a real job compared to his white husband. Yeah. But also the fact that, and I'm going to spoil a little bit, that when it was revealed what the town was up to, the fact they played on the fact that he was a Black person, he was a Black queer person, and they can get away with it. They can get away with doing whatever they wanted to do due to the fact of his skin color and his sexuality. So that right there was like a get out to me. That was like a reality check, like, oh my God, this could happen to me. Me and my white partner can move, I don't know, to, Point Pleasant North Carolina and literally be in the same situation. So it was very frightening to me when I saw that.
No, right. I agree.
Yeah, I feel like the microaggression.
No, go ahead. Go right.
Oh no, it's fine. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, like Bobby said, you know, it took place in the 90s because now, I mean, it probably still could take place if you was in a very, very rural area, though. But you can.
No. Yeah. No. Well, we have about 2 minutes left, and we have 3 minutes left. So I wanted to see if there were any questions or anything for the panelists. You can throw it in the chat.
Just throw it in the chat. Oh, let me stop.
Okay.
Well, Viktor, right quick, do you have any like literature in the 90s, 2000s that you want to talk about? Like, you know, your stuff? Or?
Oh, well, I will say this. I'll just say that I was inspired to do more writing, and I know Ryan's been doing writing to make sure that we are seen. And one of the reasons why I created a graphic novel with a Black queer character in a kind of a hard situation, because I wanted that to be something seen, because we're not really in those particular stories. So I wanted to make sure that we created something like that. You can see that. And so I'm really excited about doing that. And I know it's going to be, you know, as I do a next thing, it's going to be really something to continue, because I love to feature Black queer characters in any of the stories that I write.
Love that.
Very much.
Right. Benji asked, not queer, but how are you feeling about the Candyman remake? Are we ready?
We ready.
We are ready.
There's supposed to be a Black queer character in it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Which y'all was telling me.
Nathan Stewart.
I'm excited.
Right.
I get to see it next week. Yeah. So
yeah.
All right. Well, I think we got to go. We got about 20 seconds, but I you know, thank y'all for joining this panel, agreeing to doing this panel. Y'all were amazing. I wish we had more time because y'all have so much to add. And thank y'all in the chat for saying what y'all were saying. Again, these are amazing people. Follow them, find them, join them, listen to their podcast, everything. YouTube channel for Bobby. Get into it. All right. Again, thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you all for such an amazing panel.
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat. Thank y'all. Thank y'all.
I'm going to stop captioning that. But yeah, thank y'all so much. This was
nervous. I was so nervous.
Y'all did such an amazing job. I just wanted to let everyone know that the easiest way to get out of here so that you don't get kicked out of Remo is to press the 3 parallel lines that are up on the upper left side corner. And you'll click on that, and there'll be a thing for joined events, and that can take you to the exhibit hall. So that should be the easiest way out. But thank you so much. I absolutely love this panel. I love horror, and everything y'all were saying was just so great to hear. So thank you all for being here, and thank you all for the audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.